Welcome to the Church of Obelisk and to this position 4 tier list video. This tier list is based primarily on stats. So this is a fairly objective list. I looked at win rates and pick rates of the various heroes, and I'm primarily looking here at a higher level pub play, because in lower level games you can pick pretty much whatever you want, but as soon as you get to like ancient or divine, people don't make as many mistakes, and so balance just tends to matter a lot more. But I do also take into account lower level play to some extent, and I'm going to talk about in particular cases where lower level and high level win rates diverge significantly. Now, without further ado, let's get right into the list. First, we'll have the S tier heroes. These are heroes that are very, very powerful and probably just like too strong, and they're almost always going to have a good game. The first will be Weaver, who's just an amazing laner, and that's pretty much what makes him so good as a support. And then, you know, his agonyms can be very strong. It depends a bit on what kind of carry heroes you have, but he's like a great hero to build these items like Solar Crest, for example. And, you know, he's also fairly flexible in what kind of items he can build. You can build all sorts of defensive items or items that help buff up your carries. You can go ahead and buy something like a Lotus Orb, for example, later on in the game, or something like an Eon Disc is great, so you don't get bursted. But yeah, this hero is just mostly strong because of his laning stage and because it's just hard to kill, and that's nice to have in a support, and you get like the minus armor and so on. The hero is just very strong right now. Very high pick rate as well as good win rates across all the brackets. And the great thing about Weaver is also that he's flexible, you know. If your opponents see you picking Weaver, they don't know whether it's gonna be a support, could be person 4 or even 5. It could be a carry Weaver, it could even be an offlane Weaver, who knows. Next we have Spirit Breaker, a hero that has been buffed a couple of times over the recent patches and is now just a little bit too strong. He's very strong laner, he has huge amount of single target stun, a lot of mobility obviously with his charge, and thanks to bulldoze he has a lot of tankiness as well. He can just shrug off stuns like nobody's business with 70% status resistance. So this hero is really strong right now. He can be played both as a position 4 or position 3. Occasionally you can see him as a carry or as a 5. But yeah, this hero is just very powerful. He does well across all the brackets, maintaining a positive win rate despite like a huge pick rate. Next we have Io, a hero that's not played quite as much as these two, but has amazing win rates. And yeah, if you look at these win rates, 55%, and lower brackets it falls off a little bit, so lower level players are not really good at playing Io or playing around Io. But if you like ancient or above, this hero is very powerful if you know how to play him well. Next up we have the A tier. These are heroes that are quite strong but not broken. First we have Nyx, very powerful counter to particular int cores. So if there's like a Storm Spirit, for example, Nyx can be very powerful, and he just has a lot of utility with his stuns, and he's hard to kill, can roam around the map, get kills as soon as you have the ultimate, and once you have the agonyms, he can be so annoying in team fights. So this is generally why he's played as position 4, because as 5 it's hard to get the agonyms, but as a 4 we can afford to do that. So a very strong hero. Next we have Shakiro, not really traditionally a position 4 hero, but right now he's played quite a bit as pos 4, and the great thing about Shakiro is that he can actually farm quite fast. So you have a lot of wave clear with this hero, with dual breath and liquid fire. You can even push out waves with Necropire, it doesn't have that long of a cooldown. And Macropire is also great at like defending high ground, for example. If your opponent is pushing in, just put on a Macropire and they can't really push because their creeps just die so fast. Yeah, this hero just deals a lot of damage. He's got a lot of slows, and it's particular heroes that are really annoyed by this. For example, if you're playing something like a Meepo, for example, Shakiro is like a nightmare to deal with, because you have all these slows, Ice Path and so on, and you can't really buy BKB and Meepo, so it can be very annoying. Also, these sort of Zui heroes, Chen, Beastmaster, Lycan, and so on. Well, Lycan not so much because he just says is hasted, but other Zui heroes really are annoyed by that slow. So Shakiro, an excellent choice right now, even in position 4. Mirana, traditional position 4 hero. She's just very strong, very solid. You can farm decently well by arrowing creeps here and there. Arrow, obviously, if you land a good arrow, you can get lots of kills in the laning stage. And Moonlight Shadow just always has a huge amount of value and forces your opponent to always fight under sentries. So this hero is just very flexible and offers quite a bit. Just don't build it as a right click if you're playing position 4. You build utility items and you're gonna have a good time. Next we have Earthshaker, very traditional post 4 hero and super strong in the mid and late game. Obviously early game is not that great, and big weaknesses that you kind of need to get a blink dagger, otherwise Earthshaker is not that strong. But once you have your blink dagger, your teamfight contribution is going to be amazing. And even if you don't really get off a good echo of your opponents always splitting, that's also like indirect damage dealt to opponents, because your opponents always have to be aware of where Earthshaker is and if they might get echoed. So this hero is amazing, and win rates very solid. And generally speaking, this hero tends to be stronger if you go higher up in the MMR, because he's just a very strong initiator, and this sort of hard initiation with hard stuns and instant initiation is more important in higher tier brackets. Next, we've got Marcy, who's a bit of a weird one here. She's got very solid win rates, and since this hero is quite new, we're still not quite entirely sure where she's supposed to be played, and so we see her being experimented with in many different positions. And as a 4, she generally does seem to be doing quite well, so I'm got her here in the A tier. But this might change. She might move up or down depending on how people figure her out, and she's also probably going to get nerfed a bit in the next patch. Next, we've got Clockwork, very solid offlaner, is great at hunting down lone supports in the laning stage and later, and obviously great initiation. Just make sure when you're initiating a single hero, you need to use your cogs properly. So if you have a bunch of heroes with you, then you want to hook in there, and then you cog to push the hero out and push him towards your teammates. Because there's so many times I've lost games when clocks would just initiate and just lock another hero inside of their power cogs. That's not what you want to do generally, unless you're going for a solo kill. Next we have Earth Spirit, another traditional post 4 hero, great initiator, has high mobility, good team fight, but Earth Spirit obviously a bit harder to play in Clockwork. It's definitely a hero that you need quite a bit of practice on before you're decent. But if you're a good Earth Spirit player, he's in a pretty good shape right now. Next we have Treant, pretty straightforward hero, strong laner, you have extremely high base damage, and you can use that just to punch people or deny their creeps. And after the laning stage, you can do some split pushing with like Meteor Hammer or something, or you can even go into something like a Blink Dagger, definitely a very viable item on Treant Protection. I think quite underbought, because it just allows you to set up much better overgrowths. But yeah, you can buy lots of different items on him. You want to buy more utility items generally. And yeah, it's just a solid hero. Of course, you can heal your towers. Very good stuff. Next, we've got Grandma, Snapfire, another very solid post 4 hero. You can do lots of damage with the ultimate, and you have some like nice repositioning tools with a cookie. And yeah, especially the little shredder is just very powerful in the laning stage, and it's also great if you're up against any sort of hit-based things, like for example if you're up against Phoenix. Snapfire just destroys Phoenix because you're always going to get lots of little shredders attacks off, and that can just rip through an egg, for example. Next we have Silencer. Usually more pos 5 here, but can also work quite well on pos 4, and he just has pretty decent win rates, which is why it's up here in A tier. Similar thing for Skywrath Mage. Hero just does a ton of damage, both in laning stage and also later on. Great at finding pickoffs and solo kills. It doesn't provide much aside of damage, but it does provide a lot of damage for a support hero. So that's kind of his role in the game. Then we've got Dark Willow, a hero that, you know, is very flexible. You have all these great abilities. You got like 2 ultimate, which is always great. And yeah, you have good amount of teamfight control with your Bramble Maze, and you're not that hard to kill. You're not that easy to kill, I mean, with Shadow Realm. And the Curse Ground, of course, can be dispelled off, but you know, if it's forcing your opponent to make like a decision about that. Next, we have Wind Ranger, a hero with surprisingly high win rates. I didn't really believe it myself, but you know, this hero is doing quite well in high level games. But you can see here, lower level games, he's not that great. But if you look at immortal level pubs, she's actually doing quite well, which is why she's in A tier. If I would just look at immortal level pubs, she would be much higher here. But since I'm also taking into account the lower levels, she's here at the bottom of the A tier. And then we have Enigma, a hero with really high win rates. But he's not picked very much, so he only makes it to the lower A tier. Yeah, if you're playing pos 4 Enigma, don't be too greedy. You don't just want to go and jungle, leave your offlane alone. No, you want to deny as many of these range creeps as possible, and that way you can still maybe do like a little bit of jungling here and there on the side, but mostly you're supposed to just deny those range creeps and help out your offlaner that way and be in the lane as well. Next up, we've got the B tier. These are the heroes that are just balanced, not too strong, not too weak. First of all, we've got Venomancer, a hero that does a lot of damage. In a way, it's sort of similar to Skywrath Mage. He does a lot of damage, but unlike Skywrath, he does AoE damage to some extent at least, and also is able to control areas, but he just doesn't have like the same kind of killing potential that Skywrath has. And he's kind of in a weird spot, you know, picking a pos 4 with like no disables except for like some weaker slows is always a bit of a risk. And also here that doesn't really have like kill potential, at least not very much. So that's he's a bit funky, but he can farm quite well. He can control areas. He can give you a bit more like map presence. You get a lot of vision out of those wards, for example. So he's a bit of a weird hero, but he generally does, you know, about average, maybe slightly above average. So he's at the top of the B tier. We've got Visage here, who also as a support fills kind of a similar role to Skywrath Mage. That is a hero that just has a lot of single target damage, but unlike Skywrath, Visage is a mixture of physical and magical damage. Now, the strong thing about Visage at laning stage is Soul Assumption. Level 1 Soul Assumption does 245 damage when it's fully charged, which is insane for a level 1 spell. Usually level 1 spells do like, you know, 75 damage, maybe like 100 damage. Like really strong ones, maybe like 125 damage. But like Visage just does like 2 or 3 times as much as that if you've got a fully charged Soul Assumption, and in a like nice aggressive kill lane, it's easy to get that. So generally you want to lane Visage with a nice melee offlaner with like a stun and a hero that can just dish out damage and also take some damage and sort of is a tank for you, because Visage can be quite fragile. If they go on you, it's kind of hard to survive, but if your offlaner is being gone on, Visage just dishes out so much damage. So he can be quite strong, but of course you don't have like a really reliable stun. You have stun with the birds, but it's not always that easy to hit that. And of course, if you're not level 6, you don't have any stuns. Next, we've got Podge, a hero that for a long time used to be the most picked hero in Dota. I don't think that's the case anymore, but he's still very popular and honestly still, you know, overrated, still overpicked, but he's actually doing really decently right now. His win rates are, you know, not that bad. You know, they're not great, but they're okay. And he has a very high pick rate, so I'm putting him here into the B tier. Another very overpicked hero is Rubik, Again, not very great win rates, but he's picked a lot. I think a lot of people are picking Rubik too much. Definitely in the lower tiers especially, but even higher tiers he doesn't have that high win rate. So people just like enjoy playing Rubik, I guess, because it's very exciting. You get lots of different spells you can play around with, but the hero doesn't win all that much. So people should probably pick him a little bit less than they're doing right now. That said, though, having close to 50% win rate with very, very high pick rate is still an indication of him being a pretty decent hero, which is why he's in B tier. Next up, we've got Bounty Hunter, kind of an annoying hero, gives you a lot of vision during the game and just sort of keep hitting you and stealing your gold. But as a support, that's not as easy as if you're playing a core. But still, this hero can provide a lot with you just tracking all heroes up and tossing in the shuriken tosses. Generally speaking, outside of the early game, you're not really hitting people very much. In teamfights especially, you sort of want to stay on the outskirts, toss in your drags, and then use your shuriken tosses and just sort of like stay around and stay alive. And with that way you can survive and collect a lot of bounty and have a lot of impact with nice utility items that you can buy. You can buy things like Solar Crest, your Lotus Orbs, and these kinds of items are great on Bounty Hunter. Next we've got Winter Wyvern, just a very solid support hero. You can play her as a 4 or 5, she's great. Similar thing can be said for Ogre. He's not as good as a 4 as he is as a 5, but he's still decent as a 4. If you play him as a 4, you can more easily afford something like a Midas. Definitely still not an every game kind of item, but if you can get a Midas in a decent time, Ogre Manager can be quite nice. He's not strong enough even with a Midas to be played as a core, but as a +4, you can get greed out that Midas, and then you can get some nice utility items for your team, and that can be quite nice. Next we have Phoenix, kind of a situational hero. It depends a lot on what kind of course the enemy team picks, also what supports they pick. So for example, if you're up against Snapfire, you're gonna have a tough time. Also against these heroes like Juggernaut or Lifestealer that can easily hit your egg, it can be kind of tough, but there's a lot of heroes also that have difficulty with Phoenix. For example, one of my favorite heroes, Lone Druid, really hates playing against Phoenix because the bear can't actually damage the egg. So, and also that all the slows that Phoenix throws out is quite annoying to play against. Speaking of favorite heroes, Chen is currently, he's decent, putting him in B tier. He's more commonly played as a +4, as a +5, but he's also decent as a +4. So, he can be quite strong, but his win rate is pretty strong, but also pick rate is abysmally low. It's basically the only Chen specialist to picking this hero. And also above the higher tiers, he definitely struggles. But if you're a good Chen player, you can definitely play Chen. If you play him as a +4, you need to watch out that the team has enough stuns. That's a problem that Chen can run into. If you have no stuns in your lineup, you're gonna have a tough time. So make sure that you have some stuns on your offlaner, and ideally also in your +5 if you're playing them as +4. Next we have my least favorite hero in the game, Techies. And no one likes Techies, but someone that's still in the game. Aoi's petition unfortunately was not successful. And yeah, this hero is super annoying to play against, also annoying to play with, but it's actually doing decently. You're gonna see these win rates around 50% and decent pick rates, so I'm putting him here in, or putting them here in the B tier. Next up, Invoker. Not really typically a +4 hero, but you can play him as a +4. His laning stage is not the best, but it's not terrible either. But then the big upside, of course, is we have this hero with all these spells, and once you get a decent number of levels, you're of course never going to be as strong as a core Invoker, but still you have all the same spells and so on. You just get levels a little bit slower, and you still have huge impact in team fights. So that's the appeal behind support Invoker. Next we have Shadow Shaman, great disable, and oftentimes that's just something that teams are lacking. A lot of it's rare that you have a game where the problem is that you have too much disable, right? It can also be a problem. You have too much disable, not enough damage, and so on. That can also be a problem, but The typical team is rather lacking in disable than in damage. So picking a hero like Shadow Shaman is great for shoring up those weaknesses. Huge amount of single target disable and also good pushing potential with the ultimate. And yeah, you also can push out waves reasonably well with Ether Shock. So yeah, a nice hero and just very, very solid. Tusk, a hero that depends a bit on what kind of lane you have. If you have a nice offlaner that can sort of get in there with you and really make use of that tag team, you can have a good time. Of course, you have a BKB piercing disable. It's always going to be nice. And yeah, you have a good amount of team file control with ice shots and snowball. Not necessarily a super easy hero to play, but he can be quite strong. Pangolier, more likely to be played as a +3, but you can also play him as a support. He's fine, especially now that they've really buffed up Shield Crash. That makes him a lot more viable as a support. Shadow Demon is a bit of a polarizing hero. It's very much about how much value you can get out of Disruption. So if you have heroes with very strong illusions, either on your team or the enemy team, Shadow Demon can be quite strong. So for example, if you're up against an anti-mage, for example, he really doesn't like being disrupted because then he's just going to burn his own mana. That's so annoying as to play against this anti-mage. But also, for example, you have Luna on your team. Shadow Demon Luna is a very traditional combination. Then, of course, you have a good amount of farming ability with Shadow Poison. So, yeah, you can clear stacks with this hero, for example. Generally speaking, you wanna rather make stacks for your cores if you're playing a +4, but you know, you can farm them if you have to. You can also push out waves with this, so this is always quite nice, especially if you're playing in lower level games. The ability to push out waves is incredibly important. But this hero is actually not that easy to play, so it's actually even lower when read in lower tiers. But you know, this hero can be quite decent, so if you know what you're doing, you can also have Demonic Purge, great single target, disable. It's not a stun, but you know, it's a slow, it's a basic dispel, so can be quite strong against certain heroes, especially the kind of heroes that rely on magic immunity. So for example, like a lifestealer really doesn't like getting demonic purged, but he's a bit of a situational hero, and generally speaking, as a support, you tend to have to pick in the first phase, and you don't really know the course enemy team, so he's not that strong, right? Which is why it's towards the lower rung here in the B tier. Next we have Void Spirit, really much stronger as a mid laner, but you can, I suppose, also play him as a 4. It's kind of meh, but it's possible. And then we have Grimstroke, a hero who just always has rather mediocre win rates. I think he's very overrated, so we should probably stay away from this hero, but I think he'll still be strong in certain combinations. You have like strong single target spells that can double up, you know, things like a Roar or a Doom can be very powerful, obviously, but this hero just doesn't win all that much. Next we got Zeus, a bit of a niche as a +4, but he can actually do quite well, so low pick rate as a +4. Dazzle, kind of similar situation. It's a bit problematic always for both Zeus and Dazzle if you have a +4 hero that has no stuns, and that makes it hard on your draft. As we talked about earlier with Shadow Shaman, usually there's a lack of stuns in a lot of teams. That makes Dazzle a bit problematic, but in certain lineups he can be quite strong. And similar thing for Undying. He's obviously a very strong laner, one of the strongest laners in the game as far as supports go, but the problem is he just has no stuns. And he has decent teamfight contribution with Tombstone, but similar to Phoenix with his egg, it's kind of dependent on how good of hitters the enemy team has. So if you're up against like a Snapfire or like a high attack speed ranged heroes that can easily take out the Tombstone, then Undying loses a lot of his value, but he's good, for example, against these zoo type heroes and, you know, lone druid heroes like that that have a tough time dealing with a Tombstone. But generally speaking, as a +4 player, you're going to be picking the first phase, so there's not really any point to having a large hero pool. It's much better just to have like one main hero and then maybe like 2 or 3 backup heroes in case your main hero gets banned out. And in terms of heroes you want to learn, you typically, if you want to pick up a new hero, you want to pick one from the S tier or from the A tier. These are heroes that are very strong Just pick one hero that you really like here. But if you already have a hero that you're familiar with, who is like in the B tier, you can keep playing them, they're fine. And you could even take a hero from the C tier if you invest a lot of time into, let's say, becoming a great Lion player. You can keep picking Lion, it's fine. Or if you're like a really good Ella Titan player, you know, go ahead, keep picking that hero. But if you're looking for a new hero to learn, I would recommend against the B tier and especially against the C tier. That said, let's get into the C tier. And I'm just noticing I actually have Zeus double here. I think Zeus is supposed to be in the B tier. So it doesn't matter too much though. He's like not really a hero that's very popular in post 4, but you know, you can play him. Kind of devoting as well. So onto the C tier. Gyrocopter. Actually a very strong laner, both as a core and as a support, and that's like the primary attractiveness of Gyrocopter. It's just you're very strong laner, and then later on in fights, you know, you do a decent amount of damage with your ultimate, low cooldown ultimate, and getting off like good flak cannons is not really going to be a thing as a support, but you get homing missile is actually rather annoying to deal with, so this hero can still do a decent amount later on in the game, but mostly is picked for the very strong laning phase. Next we have Ella Titan, a very powerful team fighter. The problem is all of his spells and so on are a bit awkward, they're a bit hard to land, and require certain positioning, and you don't have sort of the instant disable that you really like to have in a post 4 hero. So he's not that, it's not that easy to get solo pickups with Ella Titan, but he's very strong in particular matchups. So for example, if you're up against a high armor hero like a Terrorblade, for example, high base armor, then Natural Order can be very strong because you reduce their base armor by 100%. In terms of items, you generally want to get an Aghanim Scepter as early as you can, and that allows you to actually go into fights with that magic immunity, which is what allows your Natural Order to really shine. Because without magic immunity, it's really hard for a post 4 Ella Titan to be in the middle of fights, but you kind of need to be so they actually provide Natural Order, because the magic resistance part of that aura is around the spirit, but the armor reduction is around your hero. So you need to actually be very close, because this aura only has 350 radius, and that's why it's nice for Ella Titan to have a little bit of farm, and why you generally nowadays see him more as a 4 than as a 5. But you know, even as a 4, he's not that reliable. Next up, we have Lion, a hero that's still quite popular, but just his win range is just never that good. Problem with the hero is that he's so fragile. You have a lot of aggressive potential, you have double disable, which is great, you have solo kill potential with Finger of Death, but the hero just doesn't really win games. And if you want a hero with a lot of stun, it's much better to just pick Shadow Shaman, hero that can actually push and end games, or you just like pick another hero like Earthshaker or Nyx Assassin. But if you want a hero with like 2 reliable stuns, then Shadow Shaman is the better bet there. Queen of Pain doesn't really work too well as a support. You need to play her as a mid laner if you want to play her. She doesn't do that well if she doesn't have a level advantage. Kotl, more of a post 5 hero. You can, I guess, blame as a 4, but he's not that great. Venge doesn't do all that well as a post 4 right now. In the recent past, he actually was doing quite well as a post 4, but nowadays, generally speaking, you want to play as a 5 if you want to play Venge. Pugna is kind of awkward as a 4. You can, of course, provide quite a bit of value with your ward, and very annoying to lane against once you get to 6. With that very low cooldown ultimate. But this hero is similar to some of these other heroes like Dazzle and Zeus and Undying. If you have like no disable in your post 4, that's a big problem. You need to offer like a lot to compensate for that. So, you know, a hero like Silence also doesn't really have a reliable disable, but he has that very powerful ultimate, and it's just like by pressing R, he's already like done his job. Whereas with Pugna, you need to like get a lot of stuff done to make up for the fact that you're lacking disable. Hoodwink, you know, she just doesn't seem to win games that much. Her win rate is not that bad actually, but in higher level games she tends to fall off a bit more. So if you're like in this kind of skill range, she's still a decent, right? Decent pick rate as well, around 50% win rate. So she's not that bad, but in immortal games she does considerably worse. But you know, it's not terrible. And Tiny, you know, if you want to play Tiny, probably just play him as a carry, but after the nerfs, Tiny's just not that great anymore. And then finally we got the D tier. These are the bottom of the barrel, heroes you should not pick as +4 heroes. Even if you really like those heroes, play them in other positions instead. First up is Enchantress, the hero that just always has terrible win rates, and especially as +4, like, just don't. Lina, great as a mid laner, as a +4, leaves a lot to be desired. Similar thing for Tinker, one of the strongest mid laners in the game right now, but just does not work too well as a +4. But some people are still like trying, and just don't. Same thing for Leshrac, again, good mid laner, but not a +4 hero. Too fragile to do his job as a +4. It just Prophet, kind of in the uncanny valley here as +4. You want him either as like +5 or +3, pretty much. That's where you can play an Edge Prophet as a +4. It just doesn't really work out. As a +3, you can like buy right-click items or like all utility items, and just provide a lot of utility that way. And your scale as a core, or you just like +5 and everything that +4 and Edge Prophet provides, +5 can also do, and just with less farm priority. So just don't pick him as a +4. And again, also suffers from the fact that there's no stuns, which is always as a +4 kind of iffy. And then Sniper. For some reason, people still pick Sniper 4. I have no idea why people do that. Sniper's actually now decent as a carry or as a mid laner, but as a +4, it's just awful. They were like a little while ago, there were like a couple of patches when Sniper was actually decent as a +4, maybe even very strong, but then those aspects were just nerfed too much. Like the whole Aghanim's build, it's just no longer very strong, and that's pretty much the only reason you would play him as a +4. So no, just don't pick this hero as a 4. Alright, that does it. Please let me know in the comment section if you think I've gotten anything wrong, if there's any heroes that you're missing from the list, or any heroes that you want to see ranked higher or lower. And I'm also going to do a +5 video, which is going to come out soon, so if you don't want to miss that, please subscribe to the channel. And before you go, also check out my offlane tier list that I've done for this patch and Obelisk filling. I'll see you there.